Houston, TX. A routine immigration hearing transformed into an international incident yesterday when Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso unexpectedly testified in a Houston federal courtroom, challenging American perceptions of the West African refugee crisis and dramatically altering the outcome of an asylum case that might otherwise have ended in deportation. Adama Ouedraogo, 32, had spent 18 months in immigration detention following his arrest in November 2023 for allegedly falsifying documentation on his asylum application. Yesterday's hearing was expected to be his final appeal before likely deportation back to Burkina Faso, a country he fled in early 2023 amid escalating jihadist violence. The case took an unprecedented turn when Captain Ibrahim Traoré, present in Houston as part of a diplomatic delegation studying Western responses to African migration, requested and was granted permission to provide contextual testimony about conditions in northern Burkina Faso. What we witnessed today was extraordinary, said attorney Rachel Williams, director of the Southern Immigration Law Center, who observed the proceedings. A high-ranking official from the refugees' home country essentially contradicted the U.S. government's assessment of conditions on the ground, and did so with such authority that it completely shifted the court's perspective. From mockery to silence. The prosecution's case. Unravel's court transcripts reveal that Assistant U.S. Attorney Blake Simmons had opened the proceedings with what witnesses described as dismissive confidence, at one point even drawing stifled laughter from immigration officers present when he characterized Ouedraogo's account of fleeing jihadist violence as creatively embellished. Mr. Ouedraogo wants us to believe he escaped through multiple terrorist checkpoints with nothing but the clothes on his back, Simmons told Judge Raymond Harmon, according to transcripts, yet somehow acquired transit documents through Mali and Niger with inconsistent dates. The government submits that these inconsistencies reveal not a desperate refugee, but a calculated attempt to manipulate our immigration system. Ouedraogo's court-appointed attorney, Jessica Winters, appeared overwhelmed by the prosecution's aggressive stance. Witnesses reported that Winters, juggling more than 60 active cases, struggled to counter the government's assertions about conditions in Djibo, the northern Burkinabe city Ouedraogo fled. The defense simply lacked the resources to effectively challenge the State Department's assessment that Djibo had been substantially stabilized by early 2023, explained Dr. Michael Chen, professor of immigration law at the University of Houston, who attended the hearing with his students. Until Captain Traoré stood up, it looked like textbook case of administrative dismissal based on document discrepancies. A captain's intervention at approximately 10:45 a.m., court records show that the clerk approached Judge Harmon with a request from a diplomatic observer to provide testimony. After initial hesitation and consultation with both counsels, the judge permitted Captain Traoré to take the stand. Dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit rather than military uniform, Traoré cut a striking figure in the fluorescent-lit courtroom. At 37, the captain's presence commanded immediate attention, according to multiple witnesses. You could feel the atmosphere shift the moment he stood up, said Maria Sanchez, a paralegal intern who was present. Even before he spoke, people were Googling his name, and there was this wave of whispers as people realized who he was. Born in the modest village of Kera, in Burkina Faso's Muhun province, Traoré's biography reads like a study in contrasts to the American judicial officials present. After studying geology at the University of Ouagadougou, he joined Burkina Faso's military around 2010 and served with distinction in the UN peacekeeping mission in Mali, earning recognition for bravery during operations in Timbuktu. Since 2022, Traoré has risen to prominence in Burkina Faso's military government, implementing policies that have distanced the country from former colonial power France while strengthening ties with Russia and Turkey. His visit to the United States, part of a diplomatic tour focused on security concerns and migration policies, was not widely publicized before yesterday's courthouse appearance. Under oath, Traoré systematically dismantled the prosecution's characterization of conditions in northern Burkina Faso during the period of Ouedraogo's flight. The prosecutor suggests Djibo was stabilized when Mr. Ouedraogo fled, Traoré testified, his English precise with a French-influenced cadence. This shows a profound misunderstanding of the reality on the ground. Djibo has been under siege intermittently since 2021. During the time of Mr. Ouedraogo's departure, the city was encircled by jihadist forces who controlled all roads in and out. The reality of document acquisition in conflict zones. In what observers described as the hearing's pivotal moment, Traoré directly addressed the central issue of document inconsistencies that formed the backbone of the government's case against Ouedraogo. The prosecutor questions inconsistencies in dates, Traoré stated, maintaining unwavering eye contact with Judge Harman. Let me explain the reality. When fleeing through jihadist territory, you don't carry official papers that identify you as someone from a government-controlled area. You acquire whatever documents you can, with whatever dates help you survive the next checkpoint. According to court reporter transcripts, the courtroom fell completely silent during this portion of Traoré's testimony. Even prosecutor Simmons, described by regular courthouse observers as typically unflappable, appeared visibly unsettled. In northern Burkina Faso, over 2 million people have been internally displaced, Traoré continued. Entire villages emptied, schools closed. In this chaos, Mr. Ouedraogo did what many have done. He chose survival. When Simmons attempted to redirect the judge's attention to legal technicalities, Traoré delivered what several legal observers have since characterized as the hearing's defining statement. When your village is burning, Mr. Prosecutor, when your neighbors are being executed for government sympathies, you don't consider the legal implications of paperwork in a country thousands of miles away. A rare reversal following Traoré's testimony, Judge Harman called an unexpected 30-minute recess. When proceedings resumed, court observers noted a marked shift in the judge's approach to questioning. Has the government made efforts to verify conditions in Djibo during the period in question through intelligence sources specific to the region, rather than general country reports? Harman asked prosecutor Simmons, who acknowledged relying solely on State Department assessments, which are often months outdated for remote regions, Judge Harman noted, in what immigration attorneys present described as an unusual judicial commentary. When the ruling came, it represented a dramatic departure from the trajectory the case had been following. Judge Harman granted Ouedraogo's asylum petition pending standard security verifications, stating that while the court cannot overlook document discrepancies, it must consider the totality of circumstances under which they occurred. The testimony, provided establishes reasonable doubt regarding fraudulent intent, Harman concluded, adding that the case highlighted the need for more nuanced understanding of regional conflicts and their impact on documentation. Broader implications for immigration policy. The ruling has sent ripples through immigration courts nationwide, with attorneys already citing the Ouedraogo precedent in at least 3 pending cases involving refugees from conflict zones where documentation is compromised. This could be a watershed moment for how courts evaluate asylum claims from active war zones, said Elena Vasquez, director of the Immigration Policy Center at Rice University. Judge Harman essentially acknowledged that document inconsistencies alone cannot be grounds for dismissal when the context of acquisition involves survival under extraordinary circumstances. The Department of Homeland Security declined to comment on whether it would appeal the ruling, stating only that it respects the judicial process while continuing to enforce immigration laws as written. For immigration advocates, the case represents a rare win in what has been an increasingly restrictive asylum landscape. Deportations of asylum seekers, whose cases were rejected on technical grounds, increased 37% between 2023 and early 2025, according to data compiled by the Center for Migration Studies. What makes this case unique is not just the outcome, but how it was achieved, said Congressman James Patterson, DTX, who sits on the House Committee on Homeland Security. We had a foreign military officer essentially giving American authorities a first-hand education on conditions that our own intelligence apparatus failed to accurately assess. That should prompt serious reflection about our information gathering and processing with respect to humanitarian crises. The human dimension lost in much of the legal and political analysis is the human story at the center of the case. Court. Records indicate that Ouedraogo fled his hometown of Djibo after jihadist groups executed his brother for working as a translator for government forces. His journey to the United States took nearly 9 months, including a perilous passage through the Darien Gap between Colombia and Panama that has claimed hundreds of migrant lives in recent years. Following the ruling, cameras captured a brief exchange between Ouedraogo and Traoré outside the courtroom. When Ouedraogo thanked him, Traoré responded, "We each serve Burkina Faso in different ways. Your journey is different from mine, but no less important." The statement has since been widely shared on social media platforms, with over 3.2 million views as of this morning. For Traoré himself, the intervention appears to have been unplanned. When asked by journalists if his testimony was part of his diplomatic mission, he offered a measured response that has been characterized by some as diplomatic and by others as subtly critical of American foreign policy. "I came to observe America's justice system, to understand how it processes those fleeing conflicts it often doesn't fully comprehend," he told reporters. "Today, I saw both its limitations and its capacity for fairness." The geopolitical context. Traoré's appearance in an American courtroom comes at a delicate moment in U.S.-African relations. Since assuming leadership positions in Burkina Faso's government in 2022, Traoré has been among a wave of young African leaders who have publicly distanced their nations from traditional Western allies while strengthening ties with Russia and China. Last month, Traoré made international headlines when he announced the nationalization of several foreign-owned gold mines in Burkina Faso, justified as measures for economic sovereignty. The move drew sharp criticism from Western governments, but was defended by Traoré as necessary for national development. His current diplomatic tour, which began in Canada last week and will continue to Washington, D.C. this weekend, represents one of the few direct high-level engagements between Burkinabe officials and Western governments since relations cooled following policy shifts in 2023. State Department spokesperson Melissa Chen confirmed that Traoré's delegation is scheduled to meet with Deputy Secretary of State Thomas Williams and representatives from USAID next Monday to discuss regional security and humanitarian aid. When asked about yesterday's courtroom intervention, Chen stated only that diplomatic guests are free to observe American civic institutions during their visits. Sources within diplomatic circles, speaking on condition of anonymity, suggested that Traoré's courtroom appearance might have been more calculated than spontaneous. This creates a narrative of him standing up for a countryman against Western systems, which plays well both domestically and across Africa, said one State Department official not authorized to speak publicly. It's a masterclass in soft power. Others, however, caution against cynical interpretations. Whatever the geopolitical context, what happened in that courtroom was someone speaking truth to power about conditions that Western media has largely ignored, said Dr. Aisha Nkrumah, Director of African Studies at Georgetown University. The fact that it took a visiting military officer to provide this context speaks volumes about gaps in our understanding of humanitarian crises beyond our borders. For the legal community in Houston, yesterday's events have prompted unusual self-reflection. Sandra Martinez, a veteran immigration attorney with 15 years of experience in the Houston courts, observed, "We saw our system through outside eyes today, and the view wasn't entirely flattering. We have procedures so focused on documentation that we sometimes lose sight of the human beings those documents represent." Ouedraogo, released from detention following the ruling, will begin the resettlement process with support from Houston's Burkinabe community, one of the largest in the United States with approximately 15,000 members. Community leader Musa Konate expressed satisfaction with the outcome but frustration with the process. "It should not take a military officer from our homeland to make American courts see the truth of what our people are fleeing," he said. "How many others have been sent back because they didn't have a Captain Traoré to speak for them?" As for Judge Harmon, Court observers noted his closing remarks seemed to acknowledge the extraordinary nature of the proceedings. "This court thanks Captain Traoré for his candor," Harman stated before adjourning. "It serves as a reminder that justice requires not only adherence to law, but understanding of context. Whether yesterday's ruling represents a meaningful shift in how immigration courts evaluate documentation from conflict zones or merely an isolated incident will likely depend on whether other judges follow Harman's precedent in similar cases. For Adama Ouedraogo, however, the impact is immediate and life-changing. After spending his first night of freedom in 18 months at a community member's home, he was unavailable for comment. The Burkina Community Association of Greater Houston issued a brief statement on his behalf. Mr. Ouedraogo expresses his profound gratitude to Captain Traoré, to Judge Harman, and to all who supported him through this ordeal. He asks for privacy as he begins rebuilding his life. Tom Johnson is the Houston Chronicle's senior correspondent covering immigration and international affairs. His reporting on West African security issues has received the Overseas Press Club Award for Excellence in International Reporting. Additional reporting by Carlos Mendoza and Elizabeth Warren.